The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That is something that has been stated in the Bible. And it's an interesting point if we understand it from a metaphysical spiritual perspective. Because when we say to fear the Lord, it might initially sound like something negative. Why would we want to live in fear? But we're actually not really talking in fear in the sense that we should be very afraid as we're going through this physical life of ours. We're actually realizing the consequences of our own actions and behavior purely on a spiritual level. And by understanding that, you could say that to fear the Lord means to fear the very essence of life and how it responds if we use it negatively. Now, even if we know what it means from a spiritual perspective, it still doesn't mean that, again, you should be very afraid. It actually should mean that you should live in a very optimistic, wise, and kind and loving manner. That's actually ultimately what it's all about. You see, when you think of the term Lord, it first becomes very important to ask yourself, who or what is the Lord? And ultimately, through enough contemplation, you come to realize that consciousness is basically connected, identified as the Lord of creation. That consciousness is the very basis of reality, of the whole universe, of your whole existence, of everything. Everything is consciousness. So the Lord, also known as God, is fundamentally consciousness. And the consciousness, originally as it has manifested the whole universe, is limitless. That is the difference between a human consciousness and cosmic consciousness, is that we as human beings are very limited in our way of thinking because we could say, confined to this physical body, this individualization of the very consciousness of the universe itself. In order to fear the Lord and making it the beginning of wisdom, it means to understand the importance, the role your own consciousness plays in the overall quality of your life, but in general of the journey that you're on. You see, people go through life allowing all kinds of negative ideas to flow through their consciousness. And we can't control it fully. They come and go. But there is a question to be asked. Am I allowing the negative thoughts and feelings that occur in my mind to control my behavior? Because if I'm allowing it, you could say that is Satan, that is like the devil, causing you to behave in all kinds of manners that is not productive and conducive to a harmonious, divine, uplifting life. So by understanding that your own consciousness will always come back to you, which is also called karma in the East, you realize, as the saying goes, that you should fear the power of your own consciousness. But again, that doesn't mean that you're going through your days being completely afraid and oh my god, I should be careful of my own consciousness. No, what you realize is the price you pay for how you're using or abusing your own consciousness. So what will we discover? Well, ultimately, one of the greatest things you could discover and realize for yourself is that when you go to sleep at night, the dreams are an indication of the overall state of your consciousness. Now, people that tend to act very negatively in the world, that tend to do all kinds of stuff that they shouldn't be doing, and where they might claim they don't have a conscience. Conscience is a faculty of God, allowing you to know what is good or bad in your own conduct. Well, some people say, I don't have a conscience. Based on how they behave, they clearly look like they don't have a conscience, right? They do all kinds of stuff that is so negative, that is so chaotic, causing so much horror and pain, not just for themselves but everyone around them, that you're like, what is going on here? Well, what's going on is that they're allowing their conscience to float and drift into very negative states. And by the dreams that you have at night, because even though these people that are doing a lot of negative things, they might not admit this, they will enter all kinds of chaotic, nightmarish realms, which is the price you pay for using your own consciousness destructively. And therefore, you also have to realize that if you were to pass away, in a negative state of mind, the odds of you entering way darker realms and layers of the non-physical realms becomes dramatically increased. And therefore, once you start to grasp this, fearing the Lord becomes the beginning of wisdom, because you realize I should actually dedicate my life to using my conscience in an uplifting, productive manner. I should try my best to overcome all the negative states that occur within myself, so that they no longer control me and guide me into all kinds of behavior that is just not useful to me, that is only causing me to suffer at the very end. Because if you fear the very spiritual side of your life, in the sense that you know, if I'm using my conscience in a negative way, then I'm also going to pay a price once I'm dead. Basically, that's where the terms heaven and hell come from. Then you realize, okay, I should use my conscience in such a way to allow the wisdom of God, the beauty, the divine, everything that is positive and divine, to guide me instead. And then you're going to discover, if you're true to this, if you're truly giving your heart over to this kind of transformation, of this kind of growth, then the dreams you'll have at night also become more positive, more uplifting, but also they become very, at times, peculiar, very wonderfully, mysteriously divine. And this is pretty hard for me to describe, but I'm pretty sure that many people of you have experienced dreams where you were like, there's something amazing here, where you can sense there was a wonderful revelation in this dream that has helped you become more aware of the unity you share with God. So the fear of the Lord becoming the wisdom, becoming the beginning of wisdom, again, has everything to do from a metaphysical perspective of knowing that you are a soul, not just a physical body, and that the way you use your consciousness plays an enormous role as to what your soul, what you as a soul will go through, even beyond the grave. And that is really the meaning of going to heaven or going to hell. See, we might initially say people that do negative stuff, we have sometimes very harsh terms for this as human beings, like they should go to hell, they should burn in hell. I mean, it's pretty intense, and we might justify saying that based on how a person has behaved, physically speaking, purely physically speaking. They may have done despicable things, and yes, the odds of them going to a nightmarish realm after the grave is very, very high, simply because they allowed their consciousness to develop in such a negative, destructive direction. But even these people will be redeemed. They will be redeemed over time. They will have to realize as well that it's all about divine unity, and then their conscience transforms more and more in the direction of unity with God, which allows them to rise up to heavenly realms. So even the sinner, no matter how bad his behavior was, no matter how much we feel justified in wishing them and condemning them to hell, I mean, ultimately it's all up to God. And God won't condemn anyone permanently to hell at all. In the end, what you're going to discover is that heaven and hell is actually all in your own hands, based on how you are using your consciousness. Is it being guided by the wisdom of God through your intuition? Or is it guided by all this physical nonsense and limiting beliefs and this facade, this where you live under the assumption that you're a physical being, so you have to fight or flight constantly. You have to be constantly in that state of mind, right? Like an animal, pretty much. See, the difference between humans and animals, even though people like to say humans are also animals. Okay, I mean, it's fine if you want to say that, but there's a difference there, and that's everything to do with their own consciousness. See, an animal operates more by instinct. We know this. We don't see them sit down and reason and then start to communicate specifically with us about, hey, let's go build this business together. That's all kinds of stuff that humans can do because of a more advanced, evolved consciousness. You see, as a human, you are a child of God, so you have been given this power to use your consciousness in any way you desire. Sadly though, due to ignorance, people use it in all kinds of destructive manners, and therefore they suffer. And they feel sad. They have a void inside their soul. You see, there's many people around this world that walk around. Actually, they might not admit this publicly, but they have told me this in private at times. Individuals in general, where they would say that they feel this kind of void inside their soul, this emptiness, this hole. Like, it's a very spiritual, significant thing. I don't know if they realize it, but ultimately what that means is that you have lost conscious connection with God. Now, the connection itself is never entirely gone, because God is the essence of your own existence, of your life. But you can blind yourself from this connection, this unity, and therefore you feel like you live in a hostile world. And yes, there's a lot of hostile things going on here, physically speaking, but behind all that madness, if you start to perceive the unity of life, you realize that most people are just living in ignorance of this fact. And because they don't understand the unity, and they don't fear the Lord, there's no wisdom there. They don't realize that they're fighting a meaningless battle amongst each other. Whereas if you fear the Lord in the sense that you understand the power of your own consciousness and how it will literally drag you into terrible places or wonderful places, means you start to respect the power of your own consciousness more. You symbolically, you could say, fear it because of the consequences that might happen if you misuse that power that you've been given. But ultimately, it's not going to be a state of pure terror that you should be living in, to be so afraid of God and you're afraid of making the tiniest mistake. No, because God is ultimately infinite love, infinite compassion, infinite guidance. And when you start to realize that, you will uplift yourself out of the very ignorance that you were initially stuck in. It was causing you to do everything that you probably should not be doing because it was not guided by the wisdom of God itself. So fearing is basically also another way of saying that you should respect the power of your own consciousness, the very foundation of reality, which has been given to you by God itself. It is a faculty of God consciousness. And if you misuse it, well, you're going to pay a price. But if you use it wisely, well, you're going to receive a reward, you could say. You will grow into more and more unity with God and more blissful states and more heavenly realms. That is why it's so important to consider, how am I actually using my consciousness now that I'm here? Most people never stop and think about how they're developing their own consciousness. They just constantly react to everything around them, and when negativity comes into their consciousness, they go along with it, they misbehave, and they just have all this chaos. And I say this from personal experience. I'm not saying I've never done this, man. I've spent many years doing that myself until you wake up. This is also part of the process of spiritual awakening, to suddenly realize the power you've been given and how you've been abusing it potentially for a long time. And then you start to redeem yourself. You start to walk the path of redemption. You repent yourself from all these negative states of mind and allow God into your heart. And He starts to guide your behavior in a much more wonderful, divine way, which allows you to overcome all that negativity that was holding you back for so long. You see, you start to fear the Lord. Well, don't be full of fear in the sense of, I'm so afraid. See it for the symbolism that it is. Understand that if you refuse to grow your consciousness upwardly in an uplifting, more positive direction, being guided by the divine through your intuition, then you walk a huge risk of allowing it to be developed by the devil, by the negative states and energies of the universe, which causes you and potentially others around you to suffer greatly. But if you realize this power that exists within you, called consciousness and how it operates, then you start to fear the consequences, in the sense that, you know, if I don't change this, I'm going to suffer greatly. Let me allow God into my heart. Let me overcome all this negativity so that the wisdom of God can finally pierce through this darkness that was blinding me for so long, that was holding me back for so long, so that I can finally overcome this and truly express and grow into the unity that was in store for all of us since the beginning of time. That, to me, is what it means to fear the Lord, and how it causes the beginning of wisdom. Understand the power of consciousness that you've been given, and then use it wisely. That is what it's all about.